They thought I'd disappear quietly. They sent me a termination email while I was closing the biggest deal of the year. 3 days later, I walked into their annual shareholders meeting as the new CEO of the corporation they used to run. You want to know what happened in between? Don't look away. My name is Lauren Mitchell. And at 38, I'd built my career brick by brick in an industry that preferred to hand its golden tickets to trust fund babies and tech bros with the right last names. As Director of Business Development at Vanguardis Corporation, I wasn't just another suit in the C-suite. I was the one who made the numbers sing. 12 years. That's how long it took me to climb from a junior analyst position to sitting at the executive table of a company poised for IPO. No Stanford MBA, no venture capitalist daddy, no country club connections. Just a middle-class kid from Ohio who learned early that if you wanted something, you had to take it. Vanguardis wasn't just any tech infrastructure company. We were the silent backbone behind half the government contracts on the East Coast, the invisible force keeping data centers humming and networks secure. But beneath the gleaming Manhattan headquarters and billion-dollar valuations, the company was rotting from the inside. Ethan Calder. Even thinking his name now makes my jaw clench. Our CEO was everything wrong with corporate America wrapped in a $5,000 suit. Smooth talker, backstabber, master of the boardroom schmooze. He'd inherited his position like a crown prince. His father had been one of the original investors. And the board was packed with Calder family allies and old money cronies who'd rather preserve their golf partnerships than build a real company. I was the anomaly. The only non-family member in the executive team. The only one without Ivy League connections or a trust fund safety net. But I had something they didn't. Hunger. And results. 60% of our contracted revenue for the year had my signature on it. Every major deal, every government partnership, every expansion into new markets. That was me. The old boys club tolerated me because I made them money. They smiled at board meetings, nodded at my presentations, even threw around words like invaluable and irreplaceable. But I could see it in their eyes. I was useful, not one of them. A workhorse they'd ride until they found a thoroughbred with the right pedigree. What they didn't know was that I'd been watching them too, learning their tells, mapping their alliances, understanding the delicate ecosystem of favors and threats that really ran Vanguardis. They thought I was too focused on deals to notice the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, or the way Calder's nephew Bradley had started shadowing my meetings. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. Their second? They thought I'd built my success on their playground without learning their rules. As I stood in my corner office that morning, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I had no idea that in 6 hours, they'd try to destroy everything I'd built. But sometimes the best revenge stories start with someone making the mistake of thinking you're just another disposable employee. They were about to learn otherwise. The Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C. had never felt more electric. I just spent 3 hours in the Pentagon's E-ring, finalizing details on a $300 million infrastructure contract that would secure Vanguardis's position as the premier tech contractor for federal agencies. My hand was still tingling from shaking hands with generals and procurement officers who'd finally said yes after 18 months of negotiations. I was in the back of the Uber, heading to Reagan National, when my phone buzzed. The email notification seemed innocuous enough, just another message from HR. I almost ignored it, still riding the high of the biggest win of my career. But something made me open it. Subject: termination of employment, effective immediately. The words blurred for a moment. I had to read them 3 times before they made sense. Dear Ms. Mitchell, due to ongoing restructuring efforts, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Your corporate access has been revoked. Please coordinate with HR for the return of company property. I felt the blood drain from my face. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering if I was about to be sick in his car. I wasn't. I was too shocked to be sick. Restructuring, I'd just closed the deal of the decade. My position was eliminated while I was literally signing contracts worth more than some country's GDP. My laptop was already locked out. I discovered this trying to forward the contract documents to my personal email. My keycard, I knew, would be dead. 12 years of blood, sweat, and dedication, reduced to a 3-paragraph email while I sat in deep sea traffic. The call from Ethan Calder came 5 minutes later. I almost didn't answer, but fury won over shock. "Lauren, I'm sure you've seen the email." His voice oozed false sympathy. "These decisions are never easy, but we need to streamline operations before the IPO. You understand?" "Streamline?" My voice was deadly calm. "I just signed the Franklin contract. 300 million. Ethan." "Yes. Well, Bradley will be taking over your relationships. He's family, you see. Investors prefer continuity." Bradley, his nephew. 26 years old with an MBA he'd bought his way through and the business acumen of a goldfish. Everything clicked into place with brutal clarity. "You're giving my job to your nephew." It wasn't a question. "The decision's been made, Lauren. Your severance package is generous. I suggest you take it." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at the Washington Monument passing by my window. They'd planned this perfectly. Wait until I was out of the office, until the deal was signed and they had what they needed. Then cut me loose before I could claim credit, before the IPO could make my stock options worth 8 figures. I directed the driver to take me back to the Ritz. Screw the flight, I needed to think. In my hotel room, I opened my personal laptop and started documenting everything, every meeting, every email I could remember, every deal I'd closed. My fingers flew across the keyboard, powered by a fury I'd never felt before. They wanted to erase me? Fine. But I'd make sure there was a record. That's when I found it. In my personal cloud storage, a folder of screenshots I'd taken months ago. Just in case paranoia that now felt like prophecy. Calder's emails about restructuring assets before IPO, suspicious transfers to offshore accounts, board meeting minutes discussing family integration strategies. They weren't just stealing my job, they were stealing from everyone. I poured myself a minibar whiskey, overpriced, but I'd earned it, and stared at the evidence. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd slink away with my severance check and my tail between my legs. Too scared to challenge the boys' club that had finally shown its true face. I pulled up LinkedIn on my phone, scrolling through my contacts, investment firms, private equity, activist investors. Somewhere in this list was someone who'd want to know what Ethan Calder was really doing at Vanguard's. They'd fired me without notice, thinking I was just another disposable employee who'd stay quiet to protect her reputation. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. 3 days into my forced unemployment, I'd transformed my Brooklyn apartment into a war room. Financial documents covered every surface, connected by red string like something out of a conspiracy thriller. Except this wasn't paranoia. This was forensic accounting. The more I dug into those screenshots and documents I'd saved, the clearer the picture became. Calder wasn't just nepotistic, he was criminal. Through a web of offshore companies in the Caymans and Cyprus, he'd been siphoning assets from Vanguard's for the past 2 years. The pattern was elegant in its deception: overvalued acquisitions of shell companies, consulting fees to non-existent firms, technology licenses that led nowhere but his own pockets. The IPO wasn't just about going public, it was Calder's exit strategy. Once those shares hit the market, he'd cash out hundreds of millions while retail investors bought into a company he'd hollowed out from the inside. The SEC filing documents were works of fiction, painted with just enough truth to pass preliminary reviews. I was mapping out the money trail when my phone rang. Unknown. Boston number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ms. Mitchell? This is Harper Stanton." I nearly dropped the phone. Harper Stanton was venture capital royalty, a self-made billionaire who'd built her fortune by seeing through corporate bullshit and betting against it. If Wall Street had a hit list, she'd authored half the names on it. "I heard Vanguard's let go of their highest performer," she continued, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that comes from having "fuck you" money. "Rather curious timing, wouldn't you say?" "How did you—" "I make it my business to know when talent gets wasted. I also make it my business to know when companies are hiding something. I believe you might have insights into both." We met the next day at a private club in Boston's financial district. Harper Stanton in person was even more formidable than her reputation. Silver hair cut sharp as her business acumen, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But her eyes were what struck me. They saw everything. "I've been watching Vanguardies," she said without preamble. "More specifically, I've been building a position, quietly. The numbers don't add up, and Ethan Calder is too smooth for my liking." I laid out what I'd found: every transaction, every shell company, every doctored document. Harper listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a leather-bound pad. When I finished, she leaned back and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Ethan Calder cost me $50 million on a biotech deal in 2018, she said. "I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor. You, Ms. Mitchell, are that opportunity." Her proposal was audacious. Harper and her syndicate of investors had been accumulating shares through various channels, enough to call a special shareholders meeting, but not enough to win a vote. Yet, with the evidence I'd gathered, she could flip the institutional investors and clean house. But she needed more than a whistleblower. She needed a CEO. "You want me to—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. "I want you to take his job," Harper said simply. "You know the company, you have the relationships, and most importantly, you have the moral clarity to clean up this mess. My coalition will back you, but you'll need to earn it. Can you handle walking into a room full of people who threw you away and taking control?" My mind raced. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about saving a company I'd helped build, protecting thousands of employees and investors from Calder's greed. It was about proving that merit mattered more than bloodlines. "What's the timeline?" Harper's smile widened. "The annual shareholders meeting is in 2 weeks. Calder thinks it's a formality before the IPO launch. He's already printed the champagne labels. 2 weeks to prepare for the corporate fight of my life. 2 weeks to transform from discarded employee to CEO in waiting. 2 weeks to plan the kind of entrance that would make Ethan Calder understand exactly how badly he'd miscalculated." "I'm in," I said. Harper extended her hand. Her grip was firm as iron. "Then let's go hunting, Ms. Mitchell." The next 10 days blurred into a symphony of clandestine meetings and strategic phone calls. Harper's network was a thing of beauty: hedge fund managers, pension fund administrators, institutional investors who controlled millions of shares. We met in private dining rooms, anonymous office buildings, even on a yacht in Boston Harbor. Never the same place twice, never leaving a paper trail. Our strategy was surgical. While Harper worked the major shareholders, I reached out to the middle-tier investors, the ones Calder ignored because their stakes were insignificant. A union pension fund in Michigan, a family office in Dallas, an investment club in Seattle, each held just 1 and 2% of shares. But together they formed a bloc that could swing the vote. The conversations followed a pattern. I'd present the evidence of Calder's offshore dealings, show them how their investments were being hollowed out. Their initial skepticism would turn to anger, then determination. Nobody likes being played for a fool, especially not people trusted with others' money. "He's stealing from your retirees," I told the pension fund manager. "Those teachers and firefighters who trusted you with their futures. Calder's turning their nest eggs into his personal piggy bank." We leaked strategically, a whisper to a financial blogger about irregularities at Vanguardies, a tip to a Bloomberg reporter about unusual trading patterns. Nothing traceable to us, but enough to make investors nervous. Vanguardies' stock began to wobble. Calder issued reassuring statements, but doubt had been planted. The masterstroke came from Harper's contact at the SEC. A formal inquiry letter arrived at Vanguardis headquarters requesting documentation about specific offshore transactions. It wasn't a full investigation, yet, but it was enough to spook the board. Emergency meetings were called. Calder's smooth assurances began to sound hollow. I used my old relationships ruthlessly. The government contracts I'd negotiated, I reached out to my Pentagon contacts, expressing concern about Vanguardis' stability. Word traveled fast in those circles. Suddenly, Calder was fielding calls from worried generals wondering if their infrastructure partner was solid. "Lauren, what the hell are you doing?" My phone lit up with calls from former colleagues. Some were fishing for information on Calder's behalf. Others were genuinely concerned. I told them all the same thing. Just wait for the shareholders' meeting. The piece de resistance was Bradley, Calder's nephew. Harper's investigator found his social media accounts, private, but not private enough. Photos from Vegas, Milan, Tokyo, all charged to the company card. Invoices for client entertainment that were really his girlfriend's shopping sprees. The kid wasn't just unqualified, he was already pillaging the company cookie jar. 3 days before the meeting, Harper convened our alliance. In a conference room overlooking Boston Harbor, 15 investors controlling 47% of shares sat around a mahogany table. I stood at the front, no longer the fired executive, but the CEO they needed. "Ethan Calder has stolen at least $200 million from this company," I began. "Bradley Calder has blown through another $5 million in expenses. The IPO documents are fraudulent. If we don't act now, Vanguard's will be worthless within a year. And you'll be explaining to your clients why you let it happen." I laid out the turnaround plan: forensic audit, clawback of stolen funds, new transparency measures, strategic focus on the government contracts that were the company's real strength. No more nepotism, no more old boys club, just results. "Why you?" asked a hedge fund manager from Connecticut. "Because I built half this company's value while Calder was stealing the other half," I replied. "Because I know every contract, every client, every opportunity he's missed while lining his pockets. And because I'm the only person in that building who can't be bought, they already tried to throw me away." The vote was unanimous. Harper stayed after the others left. "You know Calder won't go quietly. He'll fight dirty." I thought about that termination email, about the humiliation of being locked out while closing the biggest deal of my career. About 12 years of excellence dismissed in 3 paragraphs. "Good," I said. "I want him to see it coming." The shareholders' meeting was in 72 hours. Calder thought he was walking into his coronation before the IPO. Instead, he was walking into an ambush. And I'd be there to personally hand him his termination letter. The morning of the shareholders' meeting arrived crisp and clear. One of those perfect New York days that made the city's glass towers gleam like promises. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands. Power red, the same shade I'd worn when I closed my first $1 million deal. The white suit was new, bought specifically for this moment. Not black, that was for funerals. This was a resurrection. Harper's driver picked me up at 7 a.m. She was already in the back seat, reviewing documents one last time. "Calder's been making calls all morning," she said without looking up. "He knows something's off, but not what. His assistant says he threw a coffee mug at the wall when the SEC letter came up again. Good. Let him sweat." The New York Stock Exchange building loomed before us, its familiar columns now feeling like a coliseum. Inside, security waved us through. Harper's name opened every door in this city. The shareholders' meeting was on the top floor, in a room overlooking Wall Street itself. Poetic justice. We arrived deliberately early, taking seats in the middle section where we could see everything. Other shareholders filed in, some nodding at Harper with recognition and curiosity. The institutional investors we'd turned gave subtle signals, a nod here, a thumbs up there. Our coalition was holding. At 8:45, the board members began arriving. They looked nervous, whispering among themselves. The SEC inquiry had shaken them. Good. Scared boards make better decisions than comfortable ones. At 8:55, Ethan Calder strode in like he owned the world. Navy suit, perfect hair, that practiced smile that had charmed investors for years. Bradley trailed behind him, looking hungover and petulant. They took their places at the head table, Calder adjusting his microphone with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a boardroom battle. He was about to. The meeting began with standard preliminaries. Financial reports, fiction, strategic updates, lies, projections for post-IPO growth, fantasy. Calder spoke with his usual smooth delivery, painting a picture of a company ready to conquer the public markets. Some shareholders who weren't in our coalition nodded along, seduced by the performance. Then came the Q&A portion. This was our moment. Harper stood. The room fell silent. When Harper Stanton stood up at a shareholders meeting, empires trembled. Mr. Calder, she began, her voice carrying perfectly in the hushed room. I have some concerns about financial discrepancies in your reports. Specifically, regarding KLM Holdings in the Caymans, Vertex Consulting in Cyprus, and about 17 other entities that seem to exist only to receive Vanguard's funds. Calder's smile flickered. I'm not sure what you're implying, Ms. Stanton. All our partnerships are fully documented. Documented, yes, legitimate. That's another question. Harper turned to address the room. My fellow shareholders, we've been victims of systematic fraud, and I have proof. She nodded to me. This was it. I stood, and the blood drained from Calder's face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Bradley actually gasped. Around the room, heads turned, recognizing me with shock. The fired executive, back from the dead. Hello, Ethan, I said, walking toward the presentation screen at the front. Bradley, board members, my name is Lauren Mitchell, and until 2 weeks ago, I was your director of business development. I was terminated while closing the largest deal in company history. Today, I'm here as Ms. Stanton's designated representative, and I have some information you need to see. The presentation I'd prepared was devastating in its simplicity. Transaction records, bank statements, emails Calder thought were deleted, each slide built on the last, creating an undeniable picture of corporate theft. The room grew more restless with each revelation. Board members exchanged panicked glances. One actually put his head in his hands. Over the past 2 years, I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Ethan Calder has stolen approximately $200 million from this company. His nephew Bradley has added another $5 million in fraudulent expenses. The IPO documents filed with the SEC contain material misrepresentations. If this goes forward, everyone in this room could face criminal liability. This is ridiculous, Calder finally found his voice. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former employee. No, Harper interrupted. These are facts, and we have the votes to do something about it. The rest happened fast. Harper called for a vote of no confidence. Our coalition held firm, joined by panicked board members who saw prison sentences in their futures if they stuck with Calder. The vote was 73% in favor of removal. Calder's face went from red to white to gray. Bradley looked like he might vomit. The old boys club was crumbling in real time, and I had a front row seat. The aftermath of the no-confidence vote was swift and merciless. Harper stood again, this time with the authority of a kingmaker. I nominate Lauren Mitchell as interim CEO of Vanguard's Corporation, effective immediately. The motion was seconded by 3 different investors before Calder could even process what was happening. His carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling in real time, and the woman he'd discarded like trash was about to sit on his throne. You can't do this, Calder's voice cracked, his polished veneer finally shattering. The bylaws require a majority vote of shareholders present. The corporate secretary interrupted, clearly eager to distance himself from the sinking ship. We have that majority. The vote was called, one by one, hands raised in support. Our coalition, the panicked board members, even some of Calder's former allies who could read the writing on the wall. When the count was finished, 78% had voted in favor. Motion carried, the secretary announced. Ms. Mitchell, would you please join us at the board table? I walked to the front of the room, each step measured and deliberate. The clicking of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the stunned silence. As I passed Calder, still frozen at the podium, I paused. Your things will be packed and sent to you, I said quietly, echoing the cold efficiency of that termination email. Security will escort you out. His face contorted with rage. You conniving bitch. You think you've won? I'll sue you into oblivion. Ethan. My voice cut through his tirade like ice. Sit down. Maybe it was the authority in my tone, or maybe it was the two security guards moving toward him. But Calder actually stopped mid-sentence. He looked around the room, searching for allies, finding only averted eyes and hostile faces. I took my place at the center of the board table, his seat, now mine, and signed the documents the secretary placed before me. Each signature felt like a small victory. CEO, President, Chairman of the board. Mr. Calder, I said, looking directly at him. You're terminated, effective immediately. Your nephew's position is also eliminated as part of our restructuring efforts. I let that last word hang in the air, throwing his own language back at him. Security will escort you both from the building. You planned this, he hissed, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. From the moment I fired you. No, Ethan. You planned this the moment you decided to steal from shareholders and replace competence with nepotism. I just finished what you started. The security guards flanked him, professional but firm. Bradley had already shrunk into himself, probably calculating how much of his stolen expense money was left. As they moved toward the door, Calder turned back one last time. You terminated me in 3 sentences, I said, meeting his glare with steel in my voice. Today. It took me 3 minutes to terminate you. Consider yourself lucky. I could have dragged it out. The room erupted in applause as the doors closed behind them. Board members who'd been silent rushed to shake my hand, suddenly eager to align themselves with new leadership. The corporate secretary was already updating documents, replacing Calder's name with mine. Harper appeared at my elbow, that shark smile in full display. Not bad for a first day, CEO Mitchell, though I suggest we start with that forensic audit immediately. Already on it, I replied, pulling out my phone to text my legal contact. We're filing criminal charges by end of day. Every penny he stole is coming back. The press was waiting outside, Harper's doing, no doubt. Through the windows, I could see Calder being escorted to a waiting car, photographers capturing every humiliating moment. By evening, it would be front-page news. Vanguard's CEO ousted in dramatic coup. But I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. Looking around the room at employees' faces filled with hope instead of fear, at investors nodding with renewed confidence, I realized something. This wasn't about bringing Calder down. It was about lifting Vanguard's up. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room, now fully in command. We have a company to save. Let's get to work. The applause that followed wasn't for the dramatic takedown they'd witnessed. It was for the future we were about to build, a future where merit mattered more than connections, where stealing from shareholders had consequences, and where a middle-class kid from Ohio could run a billion-dollar company. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking everything from those who wronged you. It's proving you deserved it all along. The press conference that afternoon was everything Calder's weren't: transparent, direct, and honest. I stood behind the podium at Vanguard's headquarters, looking out at a sea of reporters hungry for the story of the year. The corporate coup was already trending on financial Twitter, but they wanted details. Effective immediately. Vanguard's corporation is implementing comprehensive reforms. I began, no script, just truth. We're opening our books to independent auditors. We're clawing back illegally diverted funds. And we're recommitting to the values that should have guided us all along: integrity, transparency, and excellence. The questions came fast. How much had been stolen? Would there be criminal charges? What about the IPO? I answered each one directly, watching our stock price tick up with every honest word. The market rewards clarity, and we'd been shrouded in Calder's smoke and mirrors for too long. Ms. Mitchell, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal called out, 3 weeks ago, you were fired without cause. Now you're running the company. What would you say to other employees who've been unfairly terminated? I paused, thinking of all the talented people ground down by corporate politics, dismissed by lesser men who felt threatened by excellence. I'd say this: your value doesn't diminish because someone fails to see it. Document everything, build your network. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding at the level they said you'd never reach. By evening, the FBI had served warrants at Calder's home and office. Harper's SEC contact fast-tracked the investigation. Within days, we'd frozen 17 offshore accounts and recovered $140 million. Bradley, trying to save himself, turned state's evidence against his uncle. The old boys' club scattered like roaches when the lights came on. But I didn't have time to savor their downfall. Vanguardies needed rebuilding from the ground up. I promoted from within. The brilliant minds Calder had overlooked because they didn't have the right last names. Our first all-hands meeting was standing room only. Employees who'd grown cynical under Calder's reign suddenly energized by the possibility of a company that valued merit over connections. We're not just changing leadership, I told them. We're changing culture. Your ideas matter. Your contributions will be recognized. And anyone who tries to build a dynasty on your backs will answer to me personally. 6 months later, we went public. But properly this time. No inflated valuations, no hidden liabilities, just a solid company with real growth potential. The IPO exceeded all projections. Those middle-tier investors who'd backed our coup saw their shares triple. Harper made another $100 million, sending me a card that simply said, "Well played." Calder was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy running his former company. But I heard he'd aged a decade in 6 months. His smooth charm useless against prosecutors armed with the evidence I'd helped gather. The financial press loved the story. From fired to CEO, the ultimate corporate comeback. They focused on the drama, the revenge angle. But sitting in my office, his old office, reviewing our latest government contract, I knew they'd missed the real story. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about proving that competence matters more than connections, that integrity beats nepotism, that a kid from Ohio with nothing but talent and determination could outmaneuver a room full of silver spoon executives. My assistant knocked, interrupting my thoughts. "Ms. Mitchell, the Pentagon is on line 1. They want to discuss expanding the Franklin contract." I smiled, picking up the phone. "Lauren Mitchell speaking." Through my window, I could see the Manhattan skyline. Same view Calder once had, but I wasn't looking backward anymore. I was building forward, creating the company Vanguardies should have been all along. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. It's succeeding so completely that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. They thought they were ending my career with a 3-paragraph email. Instead, they'd launched an empire. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate justice and sweet revenge. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced unfair treatment at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.